Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida Fair Tax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, April 10th, 2026. How a Tariff Fight Created the Federal Income Tax. That's the title of an article that appeared in the winter 2026 issue of the Coolidge Review, written by Philip W. Magnus. Dr. Magnus is the David J. Thoreau Chair in Political Economy and a Senior Fellow at the Independent Institute. As we endure another year of the federal income tax, it's interesting to note factors that led to the 16th Amendment and the income tax in 1913 and how it was all justified. Now, here's some points from that article. Although the federal income tax has certainly become a redistributive tool as well as a funder of the modern welfare state, those were not its original intentions. In 1909, there were congressional fights on high tariffs, and a federal income tax was proposed to reduce the tariffs on consumer goods. But proponents of the income tax bill knew that even if the income tax rider passed, it would likely violate the ruling of the 1895 Supreme Court case Pollock v. Farmers Loan and Trust. That decision had declared the income tax was a direct tax and was invalid. President William Howard Taft was a deficit hawk and an opponent of government intervention in economic affairs, but he favored high tariffs to fund the government. To counter the attacks on the high tariffs by members of Congress, Taft convinced Senator Aldrich, the chief advocate of tariffs, to pursue a constitutional amendment to legitimize the income tax, thus avoiding a Supreme Court challenge. Taft and Aldrich felt confident that an income tax amendment would not win ratification, but the idea would lessen the opposition to the tariffs that they favored. To the surprise of Taft and other conservatives, the 16th Amendment did get support from the states and was ratified on February 3, 1913. An income tax bill was passed, and the income tax became law. Newly elected President Wilson wanted tariff reform, and the new income tax law phased in tariff reductions, lowering rates from an average of 40% in 1913. This limited tariff replacement measure became the pillar of the federal tax system because of its revenue-generating ability. By modern standards, the first income tax rates were minuscule. Most earners paid a tax rate of just 1% on income. The next lowest bracket didn't kick in until earnings exceeded $20,000. That would be about $650,000 today. And incomes beyond that threshold were taxed at just 2%. The highest rate applied only to the ultra-rich, taxing incomes above $500,000, which would be more than $16 million today, and that was just 7%. But just 5 years later, President Wilson secured a massive tax hike. The top marginal rate rose to 77%, and all the other brackets saw large rate increases as well. This rapid transformation made the new income tax system unrecognizable to those who had helped secure the 16th Amendment's passage. After winning re-election in 1916, President Wilson needed more revenue for military expenditures in preparation for possible U.S. entry into the Great War. A new Revenue Act passed in September of 1916, and it ratcheted the top income tax bracket to 15%. A sizable increase, but still modest by today's standards. The next year, Wilson secured another tax hike to 20%, and in 1918, the top marginal rate was increased to 77%. By 1920, Senator Bailey, credited with speeches that made the 16th Amendment ratification possible, said the income tax had become a tax to penalize prosperity and an indecipherable riddle of accounting that could not be understood by the congressmen themselves. He concluded, a law which takes from one class to give to another class is essentially socialistic. However, income taxation yielded more revenue than anyone imagined at its origin, and the politicians can never have too much money to spend, regardless of the cost to their constituents. In conclusion, it's been 113 years since the passage of the 16th Amendment and the enslavement of the American people with the income tax. More than anything else, it's the income tax that has fueled big government spending and redistribution of money. Now, it's ironic that President Trump is seeking to use tariffs to reduce or even eliminate the income tax. President Trump, tariffs will not be enough. America needs to adopt a system that raises the funds needed to run the government, but not by taxing the work and productivity of Americans. The fair tax is the answer. The fair tax is a national retail sales tax on the retail purchase of new goods and services. It provides a family credit so that all purchases up to the poverty level for each family are not taxed. There's no withholding from your paycheck, and you never have to file a tax return again telling the government how much you earned and how much you spent. Plus, you will never ever be harassed by the IRS again because the fair tax abolishes the IRS. Now, many of you have labored tirelessly for freedom from the federal income tax and the IRS. You deserve a great deal of credit for your efforts to educate the American people on the need to fund the American government in a way that's good for America and returns freedom to the American people. It's imperative, though, that we don't replace the current income tax and the IRS with an alternative system that can still be manipulated by the ruling elite. We must let Congress and the President know that the best way to replace the income tax and the IRS is with the fair tax. Now, make no mistake about it. The fair tax is a grave threat to the ruling elites. It will strip them of their power and their ability to control us through the tax system. Their opposition to the fair tax will be fierce and unrelenting. And don't think for an instant they won't use half-truths, deception, and downright lies in their desperate attempts to hang on to their power. However, with the support of this president, we can finally eliminate the income tax and the IRS. Of course, the best course of action is not only to repeal the income tax and abolish the IRS, but to repeal the 16th Amendment as well, so no future administration can ever shackle the American people with an income tax again. We must come together and ensure that real tax reform, the fair tax, is not subverted by the elites in D.C. This will take the diligent effort from all of us. We need your financial assistance, and we need your grassroots assistance. Now, if you have contacts that will allow us to get more information about the fair tax to President Trump, please let us know. Please email us at info@fairtax.org, and we'll give you some options on how you can best help us. At a minimum, please call your congressional representatives and ask if he or she supports the fair tax. If so, thank him or her for their support and suggest they become a co-sponsor of H.R. 25 if they're not one already. If not, ask why not. Now, if your representative claims to be unfamiliar with the fair tax, offer to have someone come to their office and explain it to them. The solution? Pass the fair tax. Now, why would D.C. pass the fair tax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to fairtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the fair tax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org.